Today we shall speak on the theme English as a world language. In the early part of the modern English period, the vocabulary was enlarged by the widespread use of one part of speech for another and by increased borrowings from other languages. The revival of interest in Latin and Greek during the Renaissance brought new words into English from those languages. Other words were introduced by English travelers and merchants after their return from journeys on the continent. From Italian came cameo, stanza, and violin. From Spanish and Portuguese languages, alligator, picadillo, and sombrero. During its development, modern English borrowed words from more than 50 different languages. In the late 17th century and during the 18th century, certain important grammatical changes occurred. The formal rules of English grammar were established during that period. The pronoun its came into use, replacing the genitive from his, which was the only form used by the translators of the King James Bible. These progressive tenses developed from the use of the participle as a noun preceded by the preposition on. The preposition gradually weakened to and finally disappeared. Thereafter, only the simple ing form of the verb remained in use. After the 18th century, this process of development culminated in the creation of the progressive passive form. For example, the job is being done. The most important development began during this period and continued without interruption throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, concerned vocabulary. As a result of colonial expansion, notably in North America, but also in other areas of the world, many new words entered the English language. From the indigenous peoples of North America, the words raccoon and wigwam were borrowed. From Peru, quinine, llama; from the West Indies, barbecue and cannibal; from Africa, chimpanzee and zebra; from India, bandana, curry and punch; from Australia, kangaroo and boomerang. In addition, thousands of scientific terms were developed to denote new concepts, discoveries, and inventions. Many of these terms, such as neutron, penicillin, and supersonic, were formed from Greek and Latin roots. Others were borrowed from modern languages, as with blitzkrieg from German and Sputnik from Russian. In Great Britain, at present, the speech of educated person is known as the received pronunciation, a class dialect. Rather than a regional dialect, it is based on the type of speech cultivated at public schools and as such of the older universities as Oxford and Cambridge. Many English people who speak regional dialects in their childhood acquire received pronunciation while attending school and university. Its influence has become even stronger in recent years because of its use by such public media as the British Broadcasting Corporation. Received pronunciation is not intrinsically superior to other varieties of English and is itself only one particular dialect. It has just achieved more extensive use than others. Widely differing regional and local dialects are still employed in the various counties of Great Britain. Other important regional dialects have also developed. For example, the English language in Ireland has retained certain individual peculiarities of pronunciation, such as the pronunciation of leaf for leaf and flatter for flutter, certain syntactical peculiarities such as the use of after following forms of the verb be, and certain differences in vocabulary, including the use of archaic words such as down for down and Celtic borrowings such as banshee. The lowland Scottish dialect, sometimes called Lowlands, first made known throughout the English-speaking world by the songs of the 18th century Scottish poet Robert Burns, contains differences in pronunciation also, such as neighbor, and git, good, and words of Scandinavian origin peculiar to the dialect, such as bro, bain. The English spoken in Australia, with its marked differentiation of vowels, also makes use of special words retained from English regional dialect usages or taken over from indigenous Australian terms. Basically, there exists more than one version of Standard English: British English, American English, Canadian English, Australian English, and New Zealand English. British English is spoken on all territory of the British Isles. There are slight variations of informal written English in the United Kingdom. American English, known as the United States English is a set of dialects of the English language used mostly in the United States. The use of the English in the United States was inherited from British colonization. The first English-speaking settlers arrived in North America in the 27th century. Different American English and British English differ at the level of phonology, phonetics, vocabulary, grammar, and orthography. Australian English began diverging from British English after the foundation of the Australian colony of New South Wales in 1778. Since the 1950s, the American influence on the language in Australia has mostly come from pop culture, mass media, computer software, and the internet. Nowadays, American and British variants exist side by side in Australia. Australian English is most similar to New Zealand English due to their similar history and geographical proximity. The majority of Australians speak with Great Australian accent. Canadian English is the variety of English spoken in Canada. Canadian English contains elements of American English and British English in its vocabulary. Canadian English and American English are sometimes classified as North American English.